The bishop pair in chess refers to having both bishops, one light squared and one dark squared on the board, as opposed to having only one or none. This concept is particularly significant for several reasons. Control of squares. Bishops can control long diagonals, and having both allows a player to control both color complexes. This means they can exert influence over a larger portion of the board, making it harder for the opponent to maneuver their pieces. Piece coordination. The two bishops can work well together, covering each other's weaknesses and creating threats that can be difficult for the opponent to defend against. Endgame strength. In many endgame scenarios, the bishop pair can be particularly powerful, especially in open positions. They can outmaneuver knights and can be more effective at controlling the board. Strategic advantages. The bishop pair can provide a strategic advantage in the middle game, especially in open positions where their long-range capabilities can be maximized. They can create threats against the enemy king and target weak pawns or squares. Following are some instructive games on this subject. Let us now focus on the pair of bishops. Every club player knows that the bishop pair should be a strategical advantage. It should be better than bishop and a knight, or two knights in most of the positions. So it has become more or less a kind of a chess cliché. Yeah, everywhere in every textbook, almost like in half of strategical conversations with some other players, he will always hear about the advantage of the bishop pair. But still, it's a bit more complicated. First of all, of course, naturally, the pair of bishops is not always good. It's good in most of the positions, but sometimes the bishop pair might be a disadvantage. And we have a few examples illustrating that. Secondly, even if two bishops are better than a knight and a bishop or two knights, even then you need to know what to do with this bishop pair to actually use the advantage. So this is what most of the club players actually don't know. Yeah, so they know that they should be better, but they absolutely don't know what to do with the pair of bishops. So we will learn that. And in order to start simple, we will start with a very classical example. This will be a game which is like over 150 years old. Well, actually, 140 something, whatever. I mean, that's not important. It's really old, right? So this is English Steinitz from International Masters Tournament in London, 1883. And although you have perhaps seen it before, or you might have seen it before, please bear with me, because we will have a bit different look at the position. And yeah, we will illustrate some new things, so that might be interesting for you. Anyway, what is so classical and important in this position and makes it some kind of a typical position for the bishop pair is that there are no other like strategical things different. Yeah, so both sides have more or less the same pawn structure. There are like C and D files open, but what really makes a difference is the bishop pair. So this is what we are interested in. So black has got two bishops, whereas white has got a bishop and a knight. So let us think together. While we have two bishops, what does that mean? It means that your opponent has at least one knight. And we don't have a knight. So the importance of outposts is that the outposts actually favor the side of the knight. So when you have a close position, or there are like, some very nice fortified outposts, that will suit your opponent. For example, such an outpost here for the white knight would be d4. He would love to go to d4. What is a typical mistake of a club player who plays at the bishop pair is that he thinks, oh yeah, I should be active because I have the advantage. What is such a typical way how to exert some activity while pushing the pawns? But when you push the pawns too far, it might turn against you. You will just create some outposts for the knight, and you will have no advantage anymore. And so for example here, if black goes something like c5, c4, for example, thinking I should secure my outpost on d3, white would get the d4 outpost, and that will be the end of the advantage of the bishop pair. So, we have a rule number 1. When playing with two bishops, you are playing against a knight, which means you should be careful not to create some outposts for your opponent's knight somewhere in the center. So that's the rule number 1. The second rule, which is quite interesting, is, hey, wow, which one of the two bishops is actually the more important one? Is it the g4 bishop, the light square bishop, or is it the g7 dark squash? Well, the rule goes as follows. Maybe I will just erase some of those. Oh no, let's just keep the colors, why not? Which one of the bishops is the more important one? Well, the rules goes, you should take care more of the bishop your opponent doesn't have. Why? Because if the e3 bishop and the g7 bishop, if they get exchanged, and you have taken care of the g7 bishop, you would get a situation with a bad bishop against a knight. So for example, let's just make a few moves. If black played a6, white played this one, and black played c6, for example, white exchanges the bishops. He will get a knight. A knight that is actually better than the bishop on the queen side, and because we have put all the pawns on white squares, so we will have a bad bishop. For example, if white succeeds to fix it, with a4, a5, you will end up with a bad bishop. Of course, we don't want to exchange a pair of bishops, but it might happen for some reason, and therefore we want to be careful about that. So, it's much more logical to play b6 here for black, because now if the bishops get exchanged, and again, just a remark, we don't want to do that. But for example, if this happens, now we can see we have a good bishop against the bad knight. Yeah, because the queen side pawns are on the correct colors. So we already have two important rules. One of them is that we should take care not to create outposts for the white knight, or for the opponent's knight rather. And we want to shape the structure in such a way that it fits the bishop the opponent doesn't have, which is this time a light square bishop, or to put it more simply, just put the pawns on the color of your opponent's remaining bishop. Maybe I should say a few words about why the classical example on making advantage of a bishop pair is with the opponent's material, a bishop and a knight, and not with two knights. Well, the reason is pretty much simple. The situation where the opponent has a bishop and a knight appears far more often on a chessboard than with two knights. It's pure combinatorics. Yeah, the series of exchanges that leads to this material, there are like more of them, and they therefore happen more often than the series of exchanges that actually leads to the material two bishops against two knights. Okay, so Mr. Stein has played b6 to shape his structure nicely, and also to make sure that later on he will be actually able to help the white knight off the d4 square. Let's continue for a few moves. So white played h3, black played bishop e6, rook f d1, c5. So now you can see that this knight starts to feel a bit uncomfortable on d3. It doesn't have so many places to go anymore. White played bishop g5. So now, what should we do? Yeah, should we take on d1, or should we go with... So what? Well, black played f6, which seems like, okay, we are closing this bishop, that's very dangerous. But you remember our rule number 2, don't you? Yeah, the rule goes, we should take care of the light square bishop and put the pawns on the color of the opponent's bishop, and that's exactly what we are doing at the moment. So we are just fine. We are happy with that. White goes bishop f4, king f7, and now we have a rule number 3, which is quite interesting. Or it's, well, yeah, we might say it's a rule, or it is some kind of typical feature of these positions. And the thing is that actually our king is much more mobile than the opponent's king, yeah, because the two bishops are able to cut the opponent's king. For example, imagine on an open board that we have this bishop and this bishop. Imagine there's no f6 pawn, alright? For the white king it's very difficult or impossible to cross the barrier, which is created by a coordinated pair of bishops. Whereas our king has the light square at its disposal, yeah? So for the white king it's much more difficult to stop. For white it's much more difficult to stop the black king. Whereas for black it's very nice and simple to stop the white king. So rule number 3, or observation number 3, is let's activate our king when we have the two bishops, because it is simpler to do for us than for our opponent, which is just gate. Let's continue. White goes f3, black goes g5. We already know why black does that. Because the e6 bishop is more important than the g7 bishop, so we want this one to be happy and this one to be unhappy. Or we want both to be happy, of course, but if we have to choose one, we prefer the e6 bishop. Now I took on d8, played bishop e3, and black continues to get space. There is another feature which is interesting about two bishops, and that is that, of course, two bishops, they love open space. So they love exchanges. And that means that for your opponent it's very difficult to stop, for example, some pawn pushes, or to create some break in the center or so on, because they always have to think, okay, am I not opening the position too much for the two bishops? So shall I rather be passive, keep the position closed and give some space to my opponent, or shall I go into the conflict and exchange some pawns and pieces, which would later on strengthen the two bishops? So that's a difficult decision your opponent needs to do. And yeah, that's another advantage of the bishop pair. So here White decided that he actually should do something active, so he played f4. Black, as you can see, black tries not to create some kind of holes in his camp, so no g4, just bishop f6. Now if this knight, if this b3 knight would be able to get all the way to e5, that would mean the end of black's advantage perhaps, but fortunately that's very difficult to do, because, for example, because of the a2 pawn, which is actually vulnerable, and the knight is covering it by his own body. So at the g3, and black starts getting some spade on the queen side. Knight c1, a4. So now at but a3, because black was threatening to go a3. Now, for example, in this position there is a real threat that black goes a3 and just, breaks the structure, trades a tasked pawn, and opens the position for the bishops. But okay, playing a3, that's something what the e3 bishop doesn't like, right? Because now it's becoming the bad bishop. White felt obliged to play f4 and a3. Now, both these moves are actually against the strategical rule of getting of putting the pawns on the other color than is the color of your bishop. But okay, White felt forced to do so. Now black the bishop c4. Now this better bishop of ours. Sorry. Now this better bishop of ours actually dominates the position. Which is very nice. So I try to get the king there. Yeah, and this is very interesting. Now the bishop on c4 dominates the knight. I will put the colors once again, so there's a bad knight, naturally, on c1. And these knights can be exchanged anytime. And, but for black it's quite difficult to get into white's position. Now what should he do? b5, b4 is difficult to create because the c5 pawn is hanging. There is not so much space, and although this knight is very passive on c1, it actually covers, for example, the entry squares on the d-file. So, how should black proceed? So now we have the rule number 4, which says, sometimes you need to exchange one pair of bishops and to transform the advantage in order to actually get further, to overcome some stubborn defense. So this is exactly the situation. Now black needs to get further by exchanging one pair of bishops. So, black 2-1, f4. Now gf of course is a check on h4. That's not viable for black, for white. So now white took. And black played bishop g5. Why does he do that? Because he fights for the entry square on d2. Yeah, once we get to d2, we would be very happy. But what should I do? Yeah, if he does a random move, then black takes on f4 and goes over d2, takes on b2. That's very simple. So I took and played king e3. Black played king f6, just getting space. And again, white is extremely passive. His knight on c1 can barely move. So he might go knight e2, of course, but then black gives a check and goes hook d2 and enters white's camp. That's what he wants. So English thought, okay, I need to be active a little bit, and he went h4 and says to himself, okay, I will have a outside pass pawn, that should be good. But in fact, from this moment, it's just very, very simple for Wilhelm Steinitz. He took, gave a check, took on e1, x takes, and played king e5. Because this is not a minor piece endgame. This is a pawn endgame, because we know that the c1 knight can be exchanged anytime. And that's exactly what happened, the knight e2. Now black took. And black played king f4. Now the active king wins. Now we go to h4, we take the h4 pawn and simply win. It's still not late enough to just destroy the entire game by playing the simple-minded f4, because now after king f3, king f5, actually white might be winning or is winning differently, because this is an outside post pawn. So if those two get exchanged f4 for h4, then the king will be closer to b6. But, of course, Steinitz was a genius, and he wasn't making mistakes like that. So he played king f4. And after c4, king g4. Okay, might played a few moves, but okay, he could have resigned immediately. Now black queens first, and that's the end of the story. So, I'm glad that we went through this classical example once again, because we were able to distill 4 important rules about the pair of bishops. So first of all, when you have a bishop pair, that means that your opponent has got a knight. We need to avoid creating outposts for this knight. If this knight has some kind of an outpost, it's quite possible that you actually have no advantage despite having a bishop pair. Secondly, try to put your pawns on the color of the opponent's bishop. If your opponent has got, of course, a bishop and a knight, because that would make your other bishop, the bishop your opponent doesn't have, the stronger one, and after any exchange of the two bishops in the position, you will be left with a good bishop, and that's a good thing. Thirdly, you will have a better king later on. So be patient, try to play slowly, get your king to the center, because you will always have the color that your opponent's bishop doesn't control. That will be the color that will be turned into a highway for your king. So you will probably have a better king after a few moves. And now rule number 4 is that you might need to exchange one of the bishops later on, just to overcome some kind of stubborn defense. So that is also a tool in your toolbox. You don't need to be focused or obsessed by the bishop pair. You can transform the advantage to get further. Okay, just be careful with that, of course. Okay, so this is the classical example of two bishops, and we will have a look at some other examples as well now. Let us now test our understanding on a different type of position. We will have a look at the position that arose from the Ninso Indian opening. And it will be a game between Vladimir Kramnik playing white and Sergei Tivyakov playing black. The game was played at Chorus by Kanze in 2001. So let's have a look at the position together. So again, White has got a bishop pair. Well, the surprise side. So we have b2 bishop and a2 bishop. And yeah, black has got a lot of space, as you can see. And also, there are some weak squares that black might use. Here, for example, the c4 square, maybe d5 square, and so on. So what is White's main strategical task here? If we remember our rule about the good bishop or the better bishop and the worse bishop in a bishop pair, we know that we should care for the bishop our opponent doesn't have, which is this time the dark squared bishop, because our opponent has got the light squared bishop. So we need to make the b2 bishop active. That's the first observation. The second observation is that our opponent, okay, this time we have an knight, but our opponent has got two knights, yeah. So again, outposts in the center is something what our opponent will be looking for. So this time we have a weak square on c4 and d5 as we said, so we want to stop black from playing things like b5. That would secure the c4 outpost, or maybe c4 that would secure the d5 outpost. So that is something we want to avoid. So using just these basic rules, if you remember the 4 rules about the 2 bishops from the game English Steinitz, so here again we can use them, and quite clearly we will find out that actually c4 is the move we need to do. And because now we have secured the d5 square, the c4 square, and helped the bishop on b2 to some activity. And that's quite a lot when it comes to one move. And again, for black it's difficult to open the position. So for example, if he takes c5, takes d4, if he takes d4, we have 2 pawns, 2 central pawns that are protected. Oh, let's make them green. That are protected by these 2 strong bishops, and we will definitely be very, very happy. So after c4, black tried to keep the position closed, and played rook f8. How should we continue? And we had seen before, in the previous example, in the Marcus Marchak example, that actually closing the position is not always the problem with 2 bishops, once we don't give up an outpost for our opponent. So here if White wants to continue and gets, get up some space and get some strategical advantages, he probably cannot really avoid closing the position, but he can avoid giving up some beautiful outposts for black pieces. So for example, playing, I don't know, f3 here, just trying, to open the position at any cost. Might be quite obliged, because after takes, let's say queen f3, it might soon transpire that actually this e4 square will be an outpost for black at knight. And that's something what we want to avoid, maybe more than closing the position. So instead of going f3, white play just d5. And now we can see that the more important bishop shines at the board. So Kramnik did a nice job to, first of all, create a pass pawn on d5, secondly, get some space, and thirdly, activating the more important bishop. So now black played knight d7, because of course white can also contemplate to take one day on f6, destroying black's kingside, so he played knight d7. And black is hoping, maybe I can get somehow where I need to go, which means to d3. And, okay, again, once a knight gets a nice outpost somewhere, then your bishop pair advantage is just gone. So white definitely needs to stop this, and he played f4. And this looks so anti-positionally, how we are closing the position again with the bishop pair, but in fact it is not, because the knights are behind the pawn's central pawn structure. They don't have nice outposts, and yeah, if black wants to keep the position closed, he might. But he has to count with the fact that white has got a very simple game on the king side, going g4, g5, f5 later on, and just maybe not f5, giving up the e5 square too early, but just, getting some space on the king side, putting all the pieces there and then try to break through and just mate the black king. So that's basically what white wants. And yeah, black will just need to wait, because okay, b5 opens the position for white. As we said, there's the prophylactic advantage of the two bishops, that we are kind of insured against such surprises. So black would have to put the b6 knight, the a5 knight to d6 somehow, and that would be probably the end of his activity. Then he would just wait for what's going to happen. So Tibiakov quite logically took on f3, saying to himself, okay, I need some pawn to play somewhere, so maybe I will benefit from the e5 square or something. So now, as you can see, a funny situation arises, and the white is closing the position, whereas black is opening it, as if black had two bishops and not white. So now I took, and black played bishop g6. And now for white it's quite important that black doesn't fortify himself either on e5 or on e4. That would be quite annoying. But yeah, after knight d5, then the knight will be pinned there by queen g3, so that's not such a difficult thing now. So white played h4, trying to play h5. Oh, sorry. So white played h4, trying to just push h5 later on, and then weaken the diagonal somehow. So black played h5 to stop that after knight e5, queen g3, unless this a5 knight comes very quickly to the help of the e5 knight. Probably white can push that e5 knight later away, for example with knight f3, after the king page 1 move or something like that. So there's not that important or dangerous. So after h4, black played h5, stopping h5. And now we have the rule number 4 from the English Steinitz game. Now white played simply bishop b1. Yeah, because the b1 bishop of the a2 bishop was quite passive anyway, and we have a defender here on g6 that defends both h5 and f7. So if we just exchange it, of course not now, because after bishop b1 there's a mate in 2, takes, and queen g7, but after some other moves, if we are able to exchange the g6 and the g6 bishop, that might actually mean that we will, that our attack will be free and nice on the king side. So white played bishop b1, black played queen d6. And now there's a very interesting position where Kramnik misplayed the position a little bit, so it's nice to speak about it. The best thing what white might do here is to go bishop f5, insisting on the exchange. And now if black just does nothing, for example this, then white goes knight, follows up with knight d4, and all his pieces are nicely playing, and black is pushed away, and the game will not last long. So black has to do something about knight e4. But if he takes on f5 immediately, then both h5 and f7 are hanging. That is rather unpleasant. So maybe what he should try is to go knight e5 first. Queen f4 and how take. But still, if black goes something like g6, you can see how the white bishop, what the carrier he has made, from a very bad bishop from the initial position, now he's just shining there, and okay, white plays something like queen a4, and now imagine, for example, this knight going to f6 or queen h6, followed by knight f3, something like that. This must be very, very good for white. And also perhaps, as I'm looking at the position, what white can also do is probably take immediately and then take on f7. So there are like many possibilities how white can play this one. So bishop f5, insisting on the exchange of the light square bishops would be a very normal thing to do. Exchanging the defender, that's our rule number 4. White played bishop c3, which is maybe still okay, but okay, the b6 move might help black as well, because the knight now comes to d6 quicker. Now it's by knight e4. So, he allows black to take with the rook on e4. Bishop e4 and knight c4 now. Now black has sacked an exchange, but his knights are getting to the e5 square, that's something what we wanted to avoid. In fact, now black, okay, it's maybe hasn't equalized, but has got quite close to that, because for the exchange he's got nice outpost on e5, and also the pawn. So white has played queen f4, trying to fight for the e5 square at least a little bit. But now after knight d e5, there will be a huge fight ahead, and it's difficult to say whether Kramnik could be able to win this one or not. Perhaps yes, but it will be very, very difficult. But after queen f4, black decided to take the second pawn, and this is also very telling mistake. White took, we couldn't have taken with the pawn because the bishop on e4 is hanging. Now black took on e3. So instead of securing his position and securing the positional positives of the position, Tibiaco decided for some reason to go for material. But what did he do? Now he lost the e5 square because he's no longer controlling it. And also, he has opened the position for the almighty bishops. So now white decided, okay, I'm not going to exchange the bishop on e4 anymore, and played very nice move bishop f3. And says, okay, you are having 2 pawns for the exchange, but I'm having these 2 very strong bishops. And I will show you that is a huge asset. Look by knight c2 at by rook a2. As you can see, the knight cannot, and that's very important, cannot get to d4, to the outpost that would cost black a pawn. Rook e8. And now, one thing which we didn't speak about yet when we are speaking about 2 bishops. Of course, with 2 bishops, you can play almost everywhere on the board, because both bishops are long range pieces, so that move from one side of the board to the other one very quickly. not so much the knights here. So we have a knight on c2 that is actually, the knight on c2 is actually quite far away from the king side. So white by g4 now, saying I'm having the important advantage on the king side, on this side of the board, and you have problems to defend there because the knight has forgotten itself on c2. So black took, white took knight e5, and now white is playing on in the center and on the king side, and the knights are simply not quick enough to cover everything. So now white played d6, black took on g4 to annihilate at least one of the bishops, but it's too far, or it's too late, or other. Now, for example, knight e3 runs into rook e2, so black cannot get back with the knight. Knight d4, of course, runs into bishop takes d4, so black tried to go at least with rook e6. But after h5, bishop d3, now white's but d7, this takes h6, so as you can see, there are two passes out of nothing, more or less. And the knight is still on c2, still trailing behind, not being able to cover everything. So, black tried to pretend with the knight, but it's too late. Rook f2, nice move. Now we are threatening something like d8, and rook takes g6 later on. So knight f5, and white's back, another nice move, h7. And now one of the pawns will queen, or black can of course take here, and take here, but okay, he would end up with being a rook and a bishop less, which is of course lost. So what did we see in this example? We had seen how nicely white was carrying or taking care of his b2 bishop, just trying to open the diagonal for the bishop here the open doesn't have. And we had also seen an interesting thing, which is that sometimes you can block the position even with the two bishops if the opponent, the knights, don't have nice outposts. And maybe the third thing, which we didn't mention before, is that bishops can play on different parts of the board. So sometimes you can play where, in the region where your knight, or the opponent's knight, doesn't have the control. So for example here, against the c2 knight, white was playing on the king side. Thank you for watching the video. Please like, share, and subscribe.